Welcome to the fourth and final video in the Copyright and Intellectual Property series. This video will cover practical examples and emerging trends and flow into next week's discussion on open access and other open movements. So one example is public libraries and books. In the print world, the public library owns a book and they can lend it as many times as they want. This is a rule of first purchase, but they don't own the copyright. In the electronic area, there are many emerging issues, such as vendors being reluctant to sell to public libraries at all, higher prices expected, and restrictions on lending. The Canadian Urban Libraries Council is doing lots of work on e-books and public libraries, advocating for change in legislation, educating vendors, and that sort of thing. In the GLAM sector, there's a lot of digital archiving of historical materials and making it available going on. In order to do this, you need to do lots of copyright checking and clearance. For example, remember Byrne, copyright is broad, automatic, and requires no formality. Well, what that means is a doodle that was created by someone who died 30 years ago is covered by copyright, so you need to figure out before you digitize that and make it available to anyone who owns the copyright and get permission to digitize and make it available. Then, once you have the digital work available, you need to figure out the terms and conditions for the downstream user. Licensing electronic resources is a whole category for a lot of people. Libraries, for example, buy packages of journals and e-books. Negotiating the terms and conditions of copyright is part of the negotiations. So who can use the stuff, what they are allowed to do with it, and sometimes where. For example, when you're working for a public library, you might be negotiating whether people can use the work at home or they have to work in library only. For university libraries, there may be questions about whether alumni can use the work, or perhaps the public if they walk into the library. Will people be able to download and print and save records for their own personal use? What about if they want to share them with others? People who work for maker spaces may want to encourage open source software in this area. In order to reduce risk, people will often have users take responsibility for the intellectual property that they're working with. And there's a growing role to help creators to protect their own intellectual property. For example, if there is a creator using your makerspace who creates something totally new, they might want to know how to patent their work. Education and advice on copyright and intellectual property is a growing area. Sometimes this is done online, sometimes in person. There's general education, and sometimes people do individual item lookup or individual consultations with either creators or with people who want to use work. Some of the emerging trends and roles in this area. The traditional role involved purchase and license and use of copyrighted material, but increasingly information professionals are engaged in helping to facilitate production and sharing of work. For example, particularly in university libraries, many university libraries are helping faculty to do their own publishing. There's a group called the Library Publishing Coalition. Institutional repositories is another area. If you write a thesis, there is a repository for you to deposit in here at University of Ottawa. There's a trend to shift more from reference to conducting research for people and to have embedded librarianship. So for example, an embedded librarian might actually work as part of a research group. Within government, there's, as we saw in our reading a few weeks ago, there's a convergence, or some would say reconvergence, of archives, records management, and publications, and people working in government may be involved in open data. There's increasing roles in education and advice from the production side, such as open licensing, author rights retention, and copyright clearance. Theoretically, there are critical perspectives. So it is not always clear that lots of copyright to everyone that is necessarily a good thing. Copyright can inhibit as well as support creativity. Excess copyright means that new works are not created, and Lessig's work on the next slide covers that in some detail. There's concern about criminalizing normal behavior. It is normal for people to copy things. That's how we learn. Babies learn language by copying their parents, for example. Enforcing copyright can be problematic for privacy and freedom of expression. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out Michael Geist's blogs, Haggart's Copy Fight, The Global Politics of Digital Copyright Reform. Howard Knopf is another Canadian who blogs, a lawyer who blogs about copyright. And Larry Lessig's Free Culture deals with the things that are not made because of excess copyright. For example, if people want to make a documentary film, the copyright clearance in order to include just ordinary things. One example he uses is a Simpson TV slot that was on in a small corner just a few seconds in the background of a documentary, and that was actually the subject of a lawsuit. So people are afraid, for good reasons, of being sued if they use things like that, and for that reason there are documentaries that are hard to make and distribute because of copyright. Siva Vaidyanathan is an important writer in the critical perspectives on copyright. Two of his major works in this area are The Anarchist in the Library and Copyright and Copy Wrongs. A huge emerging trend that we'll be talking about next week is open access, open source, open data, open government, open science, open education too. Similar to open access is the Creative Commons. The Creative Commons provides a set of tools that help us to cope with the broad scope and automatic copyright. Why do we need this? Because not all authors necessarily want these rights. So Creative Commons gives authors or creators the ability to waive some of their rights under copyright. Creative Commons provides simple to use tools for creators and readers. You can go to their website, select a license. You can have icons and links to the actual license terms so that people can understand them. It's designed to have 3 layers, so machine readable, so that computers can go and harvest millions and millions of documents that you might want to be able to use. Human readable, so that people can understand what they can and can't do with stuff. And the legal code. So next up, there's a few exercises to go with video 4. And then yay, you're done. It's time to sign up for an open resource for you to present on for next week.